David Garret, and I'm a law professor at Duke University School of Law. I direct the Wilson Center for Science and Justice, and I recently wrote a book, Autopsy of a Crime Lab, that unpacks how forensic evidence can go wrong. I prepared these videos to provide background for lawyers interested in rethinking how they litigate forensic evidence in court. My goal is to provide a broad introduction to a range of issues that many of us lawyers and judges have simply not engaged with because we've too often taken forensic reports and testimony at face value. Now, if a courtroom expert testifies to complete confidence in a decision to find a fingerprint source identification, the vast majority of jurors would convict based on that alone. The same is true if the expert examines a bite mark or shell casings or the results of a facial recognition algorithm. The stakes could not be higher because people assume that forensic evidence is nearly infallible science. That's one reason why it's so powerful in court. I've surveyed thousands of people eligible for jury duty around the country, and we all overwhelmingly share a broad cultural assumption that evidence like a fingerprint can be identified and it can be linked to a single person. If only it were that simple. In my new book, I catalog the sources of error and the faulty science behind a range of well-known forensic evidence. Unfortunately, most types of forensics lack the statistical backing that DNA tests have. For a range of forensic disciplines and crime labs, quality controls and standards have been lacking for decades. We've seen scandals and audits in labs in large and small jurisdictions across the country. Tens of thousands of cases have been reopened. People have been exonerated, including by forensic DNA tests, after spending years in prison. Even for forensic methods that have been in use for over 100 years, underlying reliability remains largely untested and unknown, with research still in its nascency. Yet in our courtrooms, we hear experts testify like the actors on the popular CSI tape shows. They claim to find a perfect match. We'll never know how many innocent people have been arrested, fined, pleaded guilty, tried, convicted, or imprisoned based on flawed forensics. What can be done? My Autopsy of Our Crime Labs takes apart the process from beginning to end. We need top-to-bottom reform, beginning with real regulation and independent crime labs. We need sound science to support the work that forensic experts do. But most important for our purposes, we need lawyers to step up, and judges. For lawyers in the courtroom, it all begins with dispelling the myth of a perfect forensic expert. Forensic experts told us for decades that they were perfect, that they could uniquely identify a person to the exclusion of every other person in the world, with a zero error rate, meaning that they could never be wrong if they followed their methods correctly. We've been blind to a crisis in forensics. Now, as lawyers, we know that in 1993, the U.S. Supreme Court issued its landmark decision in Daubert v. Merrill Dow Pharmaceuticals, holding that federal judges must act as gatekeepers to ensure that experts use reliable methods in court. And lawyers expected that judges would finally scrutinize forensic science in federal court and then in the state courts, particularly after many states adopted the federal approach to expert evidence. The new focus on reliability and judicial gatekeeping does provide a new focus for lawyers, but only if they approach these questions in a far more sophisticated way than in the past. And for many years, lawyers only hesitantly raised reliability concerns about forensic evidence, like the bite mark evidence used in Keith Harward's case, and enjoyed very little success in the courts. Now, particularly when DNA testing became more common by the mid-1990s, more scientists, law professors, social scientists, and some defense lawyers began to ask, well, where's the research that supports the traditional non-DNA forensics? They were largely ignored, particularly in our courts. That's why there's so much that lawyers can do today to raise these issues to the forefront. We need to stop using grossly unreliable techniques like the bite mark comparisons, but also we need to be more cautious and careful when permitting traditional forensics like fingerprinting to be used in courtrooms. Judges have been almost totally unwilling to step in. However, these so-called experts should have to meet a bar, a very high bar, as exoneree Keith Harward has put it. We can fix forensics. Forensics is like air travel or pharmaceuticals, which we carefully regulate, both through administrative agencies and in our courtrooms, because the consequences are too great to leave them unregulated. Forensics are not like astrology, which we don't regulate because we don't expect it to be reliable. We need national regulation of forensics. Lawyers can lead this fight by educating judges and jurors. We can counter the false assumptions that people have the assumption that forensics cannot be wrong, that there are such a thing as a perfect match. That is what these CLE videos are designed to help you do. Thank you.